Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. $12 billion US is a lot of money. Turns out US physicians have received more than $12 billion in payments from the pharmaceutical and medical device industry over a 10-year period, according to new analysis. Now, we spoke previously about the issue of doctors receiving payments and sitting on boards and committees that set guidelines. And as I said then, we need doctors to be involved in industry. And for those of you who aren't aware, I'm medical advisor to Little Green Pharma, which is a medicinal cannabis company. And we need doctors to be involved in setting policies, guidelines, and determining what is useful and what isn't. But those two roles are quite separate, very, very separate roles. And the analogy I used previously is you can't play a game of sport and simultaneously be the umpire. You can't. It just doesn't make sense. You have a view. You're there to represent a particular interest if it comes to it in a discussion or debate. And that's good. And we need people to argue cases. But we need somebody else to be assessing the various merits of those cases. Now, it's in my mind now because Vinay Prasad, who's an American hematologist and oncologist, excellent guy. Look, hope you're listening and following this podcast, but I'd certainly recommend Vinay. He's put in his most recent Substack, and he's great to follow on there. And I'll quote, "Should drug companies be allowed to get their most costly products on the US market not based on living longer or better, but killing more plasma cells in bone marrow? Specifically, is MRD negativity at 9 or 12 months a suitable basis for accelerated approval in multiple myeloma?" Now, I'm not a hematologist, so I don't want to go into the details there, but essentially what Vinay is saying, and he is a hematologist and oncologist, currently the cost to treat a single patient with myeloma for a year is upwards of $600,000, but this change will be easy to clear $1 million a year or more. And make no mistake, and this is, I'm going to quote Vinay, MRD negativity does not have a strong correlation with living longer. The FDA's own analysis shows a weak correlation. No analysis presented showing whether it predicts quality of life. And yet, as Vinay said, he was allowed to speak for 5 minutes. He was the only person to appear at this inquiry who argued against it being approved. And I'll quote his conclusion: "The FDA lives in a bubble where they only talk to people who lavish praise on them and far more with their industry representatives than the critics of their policy. That's fine if their goal is to balloon healthcare spending till our country goes bankrupt, whilst failing to generate evidence that optimises survival and quality of life for patients. Sadly, it seems that is their goal." That's Vinay's words, not mine, but I certainly wouldn't disagree with him. Looks like there could be $12 billion or so reasons why that might be the case. A letter published on March 28 in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that industry made over 85 million payments to more than 820,300, and they're classing that as 57%, of eligible physicians across 39 specialties between 2013 and 2022. Nearly 94% of payments were related to one or more marketed medical products. Researchers examined data in the Open Payments database, and this was part of the Affordable Care Act, or what's called the Sunshine Act, that was introduced under the Obama administration. So it's all out there hiding in plain sight. Most people, probably myself included, don't tend to go and look at it. And there's another page, and I'll put both of these in the links below, Violation Tracker Industry Summary page. Penalties since the year 2000, and I've just got to work backwards here with the numbers. 106, and this is in US dollars, $116,245,163,450. That's just in fines and penalties. Forget R&D costs, forget marketing and advertising costs. The highest penalties, Johnson & Johnson, 24 billion, 88 records. Pfizer, nearly 11 billion, 98 records. Look, go and have a look. There's all the big names that are, on this page. There's so much to unpack with this, and we'll probably do some further talks about this subject. But these are big names, and none of this has sent any of these companies to the wall, which tells you one thing: they see it as a cost of doing business. The fines, which are massive, and one of the biggest fines that was levied was over $3 billion to a company for marketing antidepressants. This was back in the mid-2000s. I don't think big companies don't like to pay this amount of money, but it does suggest that it doesn't bother them sufficiently to change their ways if some of these companies have been fined over 90 times in the last 20-something years. And these are massive amounts of money, but it doesn't appear that it's having much impact. So to get back to where we started, conflicts of interest are a problem. Now, everybody has conflicts of interest, but if they're declared, then you know where people stand. But what really matters is that the people who can make decisions are paid differently to the people who are arguing for a decision to be made. It's a bit like the judge is different to the two lawyers in a court case. The lawyers are making their arguments on behalf of their clients. That's good. That's what they need to do. The judge is there to make a determination to the best of his or her abilities. And look, maybe nobody's going to get it right 100% of the time. But if the judge is being paid by one team, that's a real problem. We wouldn't want that. We wouldn't accept that. I hope we wouldn't accept it. We shouldn't accept it in the practice of medicine. And especially what we've seen over the last few years, the corruption of medical practice and the decreasing trust that people have, and I completely get it. I completely get it. The decreasing trust that people have in health authorities and big public health has come about because gradually this type of information is leaking out there, and it is. It does leak out, but it is also hidden in plain sight. The information is there. We need to be asking more questions, and that's both as a medical profession, and I'll put my hand up and say that the profession is not good enough at asking questions. It is too accepting of dogma from people who work for the government or work in some university and somehow then claim that they know better than everybody else. They don't. But also the community at large and individuals. And it ultimately comes back to the individual to have control and say over what is best for their health. And there are no two people who are identical. So the idea that there is one size fits all with any aspect of health, there might be one size that's suitable for a lot and for different people in different circumstances, but the idea that there is a one size fits all and that anybody externally is always going to know exactly what is best for you and your particular circumstances is and always was and always will be fundamentally flawed. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.